where we take the most comprehensive guides, the deepest research notes, and, well, the essential strategic playbooks, and distill them into actionable knowledge just for you. Now, let's start with a feeling I think we all know, maybe a bit too well, that sharp, almost metallic taste of instant regret.
Oh, yeah.
It hits you right after you've spoken impulsively, maybe in a high-pressure meeting, perhaps reacting defensively to critique, or, snapping at a family member when you're tired.
Yeah.
In that flash, you realize those words just cost you credibility, maybe caused unnecessary friction, or worse, missed a vital opportunity to actually lead thoughtfully.
It's that universal communication challenge, isn't it? That impulse that just jumps out before your brain catches up, really, before logic or wisdom kicks in.
Right.
And what the vast body of research we looked at emphasizes is this simple kind of painful truth. Speaking without thinking costs significantly more than those few seconds it takes to pause. It breaks connections, it erodes trust, and it definitely weakens your overall authority.
And that's precisely our mission today. We are undertaking a deep dive into what we're calling the Master Playbook for Transforming Communication, a system we call Think First, Talk Smart.
Yeah.
Our source materials are really comprehensive. They cover everything from, foundational psychological theory and specific daily exercises, right through to advanced techniques for effective persuasion and even conflict resolution.
So the aim here for you listening is to help transform your communication from something that maybe just happens on autopilot.
Yeah, reactive.
Exactly. Into a skill that is clear, confident, and utterly purposeful.
So what's the starting point? What's the foundational insight here?
What's truly foundational, and this grounds the entire guide, really, is recognizing that every single word you utter begins in the mind. Simple as that.
Okay.
Words are basically the physical manifestation of your internal landscape. They reflect your thoughts, your emotions, your level of mental organization. If the engine inside is running hot or disorganized or driven purely by impulse,
then the output's going to be messy.
Inevitably. Messy, vague, defensive, you name it.
Okay, so let's unpack that core idea. The key takeaway, the single most crucial concept for us to grasp today. Sounds like it's about the space between thinking and speaking.
That's it, exactly. The strategic heart of all smart communication isn't the delivery itself, not really, but the pause.
Yeah.
That split second between having the thought and actually voicing the words.
Like a pause.
Precisely. That pause is your filter. It is the space where you can actually stop that raw emotional impulse. You can vet the clarity of your own thought and consciously choose precision over just reacting.
Okay.
And that pivotal insight leads us directly into the first absolutely indispensable skill we need to cover.
Right, the power of the pause.
Yeah.
The sources are very clear about the immediate, often negative consequences of just, operating purely on impulsivity.
They really are.
We've all seen that classic workplace example, right? You're presenting an idea, maybe you're passionate about it, and a senior colleague criticizes a key assumption you made. What happens next?
Well, your initial raw emotional impulse, often governed by the amygdala, the brain's sort of fear and defense center, wants to fire back, maybe with sarcasm, maybe defensively.
Sir, protect yourself.
Yeah, exactly. But if you speak immediately, you've basically confirmed every negative subconscious assessment they might have had about you. You're hostile. Maybe you're brittle under pressure. You can't handle critical feedback professionally. You reacted to the criticism, not the idea.
You completely failed to respond constructively.
Okay.
I hear that, but I have to introduce a note of skepticism here, maybe something the listener's feeling too.
Okay.
In a fast-paced environment, especially in really competitive fields, doesn't just stopping and counting to 3 signal hesitation, maybe a weakness, or look like you've been caught off guard?
That's a really important question, and the research addresses it directly. The pause, when it's executed correctly, signals deliberation, not weakness. Big difference.
Deliberation.
Yeah. Instead of stammering or using filler words like, the thoughtful communicator uses that moment to gather themselves. So instead of snapping back, how dare you criticize my work, without understanding the context, which is the impulse.
Right.
The thoughtful response becomes something like, that's an interesting point. Let me just clarify the underlying data for that assumption before we move forward. See? That small, controlled hesitation demonstrates composure, professionalism, and actually confidence.
So the pause isn't really about silence. It's more about active internal strategic review.
Oh.
Okay. So what's the practical day-to-day pause practice the sources recommend to really internalize this habit? How do we build that muscle?
It's a really simple 3-step method. And it's designed specifically to interrupt that impulse response loop and start essentially rewiring the brain. This is something you can start doing today, literally.
Okay, let's hear it.
Step 1, recognize the trigger and count. When you feel that emotional spike, anger, defensiveness, maybe even overwhelming excitement, silently count. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, before you allow yourself to respond.
Okay, 3 seconds.
3 seconds. Step 2, internal review. During that tiny window, that pause, ask yourself 2 essential clarifying questions. What is my absolute main point right now? And how can I say it clearly and concisely?
Right, point and clarity.
Point and clarity. And then step 3, deliver. Only after this mini reflection do you actually speak.
That's the key, isn't it? It makes the abstract idea of thinking first really concrete and measurable. You're not just hoping for self-control, you're actually executing a defined process.
Exactly. And the sources really emphasize this. This practice must not be reserved only for high-stakes arguments or big meetings. That's not enough.
Okay.
It's training. You have to consciously integrate this 3-count practice into short, even mundane daily conversations, like a colleague asking where you want to grab lunch or your kid asking for help with homework.
So even the small stuff trains the brain.
Absolutely. The more you consciously force that 3-count reflection in low-stakes environments, the faster your brain learns to make deliberation a habit, not some massive effort you have to summon when you're already stressed out. You're essentially training the strategic thinking part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, to take precedence over those reactive, impulsive centers.
Okay, so we're building that pause habit. As we move into the next foundational piece, there's this powerful realization. You really can't filter or structure or improve what you don't even recognize is going on inside you.
Spot on.
The sources make a really compelling argument that self-awareness isn't just some soft skill. It's actually the bedrock of intelligent communication.
It is absolutely essential. Self-awareness, understanding your own reflexive thoughts, your underlying emotions, and crucially, your personal triggers. That's the prerequisite for regulating your responses and avoiding reckless speech. If you don't know what sets you off, you can't possibly guard against it effectively.
Right. So we need to map those emotional danger zones.
Yeah.
What are the common scenarios the guide identifies that tend to prompt this impulsive, often regrettable speech?
The research consistently flags about 4 common culprits. First, direct criticism, where you feel personally attacked rather than just having your work judged. That's a big one.
Yeah, it feels personal.
Exactly. Second, high stress or time constraints. When urgency just overwhelms deliberate thought, you feel rushed.
Okay.
Third, physical states. Things like extreme fatigue, hunger, even lack of sleep, they significantly lower your impulse control.
Good reminder. Basic needs matter.
They really do. And fourth, feelings of injustice. When you perceive unfairness, that sort of moral anger often bypasses your filter completely. Recognizing that you're in one of these states is honestly half the battle won.
Okay, so knowing the triggers is one thing, but making that recognition actionable. The guide provides the trigger journal. This sounds like a high-impact, practical exercise. Can you walk us through how a listener could implement this, maybe just for 1 week to start?
Yeah, the trigger journal is basically a simple feedback loop. It's designed for what psychologists call cognitive reappraisal. For 1 week, anytime you notice yourself reacting emotionally or impulsively, you jot down 3 things, ideally pretty soon after.
Okay.
1, the situation. Just describe the external event briefly.
Yeah.
Like, boss asked for a timeline reduction. 2, the emotion and response. Identify the exact emotion you felt, frustration and panic maybe, and record the actual impulsive words you used or almost used, be honest.
Right.
And 3, the reappraisal. This is the crucial step. Reflect on how a paused, different response could have been formulated. What should you have said, ideally? What would the think first, talk smart version sound like?
Why does just writing this down help? How does externalizing it reduce the impulse's power?
Good question. By writing it down, you force the processing away from the fast emotional limbic system and into the slower, more analytical prefrontal cortex. It's the psychological benefit of externalization. By analyzing the impulsive response after the fact, when you're calm, you gain distance and clarity. This makes choosing the more thoughtful response easier next time you're in a similar situation. You're essentially practicing the correct response mentally, preparing for the next encounter.
Beyond journaling, the guide talks about mindfulness techniques, which makes sense. For someone feeling overwhelmed in the moment, how do simple things like focused breathing help them stay centered enough to think clearly before they speak?
Mindfulness is really about creating presence, being right here, right now. And that presence is fundamentally necessary to access clear, strategic thought. When stress hormones like cortisol flood your system, your brain literally bottlenecks thinking. These techniques are like rapid response mechanisms.
Okay, give us an example.
Well, the classic one is focused breathing. Just the simple 4-count inhale, holding for 4, and exhaling for 4. That short, controlled physical act immediately signals safety to your nervous system. It helps drop the heart rate and, crucially, provides that critical mental space before you verbalize.
Simple, but effective.
Very. Another is the body scan. Just taking a momentary physical check-in. Notice tension. Are your shoulders hunched? Is your jaw tight, your hands clenched? Actively relaxing those muscles feeds back to the brain, enhancing cognitive clarity. Physical relaxation aids mental relaxation.
And then there's this idea of observing thoughts, which sometimes sounds a bit abstract.
Yeah.
How does that work practically?
It's maybe the highest level of this kind of self-awareness. It means noticing the emotion, like observing a flash of anger rising without immediately judging it or, importantly, acting on it. You're simply labeling it internally. Okay, I am feeling irritation right now.
Just naming it.
Just naming it. That separation, that pause between feeling and reacting, allows you to consciously choose your words based on your actual goals for the conversation, rather than letting the raw emotion dictate the outcome.
That idea that smart speaking begins with silence, or maybe begins with listening, really resonates. Which moves us nicely into active listening. Because so often, we aren't really listening, are we? We're just waiting for our turn to speak, busy rehearsing our counter-argument or our next brilliant point.
Instead of truly processing the message being delivered, it's incredibly common.
Yeah.
And the smart communicator prioritizes listening first, full stop. The sources outline some core listening techniques that are actually dual purpose.
Yeah.
They confirm your engagement, which builds rapport, but they also strategically buy you more thinking time.
Okay, like what?
The most important technique is probably, paraphrasing, repeating the speaker's main points back to them in your own words. For example, so if I understand correctly, your primary concern is the Q3 budget allocation.
Right.
That serves 3 key functions at once. It confirms you understood, it signals immense respect and attentiveness, people love to feel heard, and it naturally extends your mandatory pause before you formulate your detailed response. It forces you to process.
And we shouldn't overlook the nonverbal cues either, right, while we're listening.
Absolutely vital for signaling engagement. Things like maintaining appropriate eye contact, not staring, but connecting. Nodding subtly, keeping an open body posture, not crossed arms. These all signal, I am engaged, you have my full attention, which is crucial for building trust.
Okay.
And critically, if you are unsure about something, use clarifying questions that focus purely on understanding, not setting up a debate. Things like, do you mean a hard deadline for that, or is that more of a flexible target? Or could you explain that specific metric a bit further for me?
But tell me, for the listener who knows they're high energy, maybe prone to jumping in, how does active listening really help them overcome that powerful impulse to interrupt?
It's the ultimate forcing function for the pause. Think about it. By committing mentally to a daily listening practice where you focus entirely on listening, consciously avoiding interruption, and mentally summarizing the speaker's main point, before you even think about formulating any response, you are naturally integrating that pause skill.
Ah, I see.
You literally cannot mentally summarize their point accurately and immediately interrupt yourself. You're forcing your brain to process the input fully before outputting a response. And the side benefits are huge. It automatically reduces conflict and helps you avoid that embarrassing mistake of arguing against a point the speaker wasn't even making in the first place.
Because you actually heard them.
Because you actually heard them.
Okay, so let's say we've successfully trained ourselves to pause, we've developed better self-awareness, we're listening actively. Fantastic. Now we need to address the content, making sure the words that eventually come out are actually coherent.
Right. Because unorganized thoughts lead to unorganized speech. The rambling, the incomplete sentences, the arguments that go in circles.
We've all been there listening to someone like that.
Exactly. And it not only confuses listeners, but it instantly damages your professional credibility. People assume if you can't speak clearly, you probably can't think clearly.
So the clarity of the output needs to match the clarity of the thought process underneath.
Fundamentally. And the sources provide a profoundly simple yet incredibly effective universal structure. It's something you can apply to almost anything. A formal pitch, a quick email reply, even an impromptu conversation that pops up.
Okay, let's spend some time on this because structure feels really actionable. Can you break down this basic 3-part structure for clarity? Maybe use a detailed professional example first.
Sure. Think of it as the intro main conclusion model, but applied to spontaneous speech. Let's imagine you're in a meeting and you want to pitch a change to a project methodology.
Okay.
Step 1. State the main point first, the what. Lead with your conclusion. Don't bury the lead, as they say in journalism, for example. I recommend we immediately pivot to a different quality assurance model for this project, specifically moving to parallel testing. Straight up.
Got it. Direct.
Step 2. Provide supporting information, the why. This is where you give the evidence that justifies your main point. Example. Because our recent data shows the sequential testing model is creating about a 30% bottleneck in the deployment phase, and we know parallel testing has historically reduced time to market in similar projects by about 2 weeks. Facts and data.
Makes sense. The reason.
And step 3. Conclude with a solution or call to action, the how. Give the listener a clear direction on what happens next. Example. So, to implement this, I suggest we schedule a quick 15-minute call later today with engineering to map out the transition, ideally starting tomorrow morning. Clear next step.
That structure feels vital for professional settings because it's efficient. It respects people's time. Now, could we apply that same structure to maybe a more common high-stakes personal scenario, like giving difficult feedback to someone who reports to you?
Absolutely. The structure applies seamlessly and actually makes difficult conversations less awkward.
How so?
Okay, same 3 parts. 1, main point, the goal. Be direct, but focused on behavior or outcome. We need to discuss some specific ways to improve the speed and thoroughness of your client reports. Clear, objective goal statement.
Not attacking the person.
Exactly. 2, supporting information. The example's impact. Provide specific, factual evidence, not emotional judgment. Specifically, last week's report for the Acme account lacked the financial projection summary we discussed, which unfortunately led to some confusion in their follow-up meeting. Concrete example.
Right, factual.
And 3, call to action, the solution. Offer a clear path forward. So what I suggest is we start with a weekly check-in, maybe 15 minutes on Mondays at 9 a.m., focusing only on the final structure of the report summary. How does that sound? Clear, collaborative, next step. Using this structure helps ensure that even tough feedback feels constructive and focused, not just like criticism.
Before uttering even the first word of that structure, though, the guide suggests a rapid internal review, like a mental checklist. If we only have those 2 or 3 seconds from our pause, what should that internal voice be quickly asking?
Yeah, this is like a micro checklist to prevent rambling or misalignment. You basically run through these 4 questions super fast. First, purpose. What is the one single main point I absolutely need to convey right now? Just one.
Nail the core message.
Second, audience. Who am I actually talking to? This governs everything, your tone, formality, whether you use technical jargon or keep it simple.
Okay, tailor it.
Third, tone. What emotional coloring should I project? Neutral, firm, empathetic. What's appropriate and effective here?
Choose the mood.
And fourth, clarity. Are the words I'm about to use concise? Can I cut anything out? Is this the simplest way to say it?
Okay, purpose, audience, tone, clarity. Got it. Speaking of clarity, let's talk about precision and word choice. I know I'm guilty of this, and probably many listeners are too relying on vague language, those placeholder words like stuff, things, that situation.
Oh, vague language is the enemy of professional competence. Seriously. Using words like stuff, things, or whatever communicates, frankly, intellectual uncertainty or even laziness. Smart communication demands specificity.
So we need to actively fight vagueness.
They do. We need to internalize the contrast. Instead of saying we need to fix some stuff in the plan, force yourself to say we need to revise the budgetary assumptions related to vendor fees in the Q4 plan. Specificity builds trust and understanding. Vagueness just breeds questions and doubt.
And then there is tone. We touched on it, but the tone conveys so much emotion and attitude, often cutting right through the words themselves. If your tone is dismissive or sarcastic, even the best structured argument can just fall apart.
Tone is incredibly persuasive, sometimes much more so than the actual content. The core recommendation from the sources is to always default to a neutral, calm tone, especially in conflict situations.
Avoid the heat.
Exactly. Avoid sarcasm, aggression, even that passive-aggressive sigh we sometimes do, because that instantly shifts the focus from the objective content of the message onto the emotional dynamic between the speakers. A calm, measured tone encourages cooperation, even if the topic itself is challenging.
This connects directly back to managing emotions in the moment. If that amygdala hijacks the conversation midstream, all the structure and clarity you plan just goes out the window. What are the immediate, in-the-moment techniques for staying grounded when you feel that emotional surge?
These are accessible coping mechanisms designed to be deployed right then and there.
Okay.
First, back to basics. Pause and breathe. Reiterate that 4-count inhale, exhale. It's a physical intervention that literally changes your physiological state. Don't underestimate it.
Got it. Number one tool.
Second, labeling. Silently identify the specific emotion you are feeling. The simple act of naming it, okay, I feel defensive right now, or I am feeling annoyed, actually reduces the intensity of that feeling. It helps you move from being the emotion to observing it.
Creates distance.
Creates distance, exactly. And third, reframe. Immediately shift your internal focus away from the problem or the person you feel is causing it and on to solutions and practical next steps. If anger starts building, your internal voice needs to pivot hard. Okay, blame doesn't matter right now. What is the next tangible step we can take to fix this issue? Focus on the future, not the past.
Okay, so once those foundational skills can pass, the pause, the self-awareness, the listening, the structures start becoming more internalized, we can move into more advanced communication territory.
Right.
Smart speech here isn't just about avoiding the stakes anymore. It's about actively influencing outcomes, inspiring action, and gaining, ideally, unwavering trust. Feels like moving from defense to offense in a good way.
That's a great way to put it. What defines smart speech at this level is its purposefulness. It's about achieving something specific. The sources identify 4 core principles that really elevate communication from just being informative to being genuinely influential.
Okay, what are they?
First, clarity, but taking it a step further. It means actively avoiding jargon and unnecessary complexity unless your audience absolutely requires it. Using analogies can be great here to make abstract ideas more tangible.
Make it accessible.
Second, empathy. Really consciously adjusting your message based on understanding the listener's core concerns, their motivations, their perspective. If your listener is highly cost-sensitive, you frame your pitch around savings. Even if your main interest is, say, innovation, you have to meet them where they are emotionally and logically.
Okay. Understand the audience deeply.
Third, evidence. Persuasion relies on proof. You absolutely must support your claims with verifiable facts, specific examples, or solid data points, saying, I believe we should outsource our IT support is weak.
Just an opinion.
Exactly. Saying, outsourcing IT support, as demonstrated by the case study of competitor X, is projected to reduce our operating expenditure by roughly 18% in the next fiscal year. Now that's compelling.
Data makes the difference.
And fourth, confidence without arrogance. Speaking with conviction is important, using clear, declarative statements, maybe a stronger vocal projection, a measured pace, but this has to be guided by humility. The second, confidence tips over into arrogance, you break trust, and all your influence just evaporates.
That's a fine line to walk sometimes.
It really is.
That evidence piece feels non-negotiable for credibility.
Yeah.
But we also know, especially in high-stakes situations, that facts alone often don't move people. People tend to make decisions emotionally and then justify them rationally afterward.
That's absolutely true.
And that brings us to storytelling as a powerful persuasion tool.
Yes. Storytelling is arguably the most effective vehicle for creating empathy and connection. Stories are naturally memorable, they're relatable, and they can momentarily bypass that critical, analytical part of the mind, allowing for a deeper connection.
So how do you tell an effective story in a professional context? What are the key components?
The sources mandate that effective stories, even short ones, generally have 4 key components. 1, context. Set the scene quickly and efficiently. So, 3 years ago, when we launched the original iteration of this software platform.
Okay, where and when?
2, conflict, the challenge. Introduce a relatable problem or obstacle. We immediately hit a wall because our decentralized marketing teams simply couldn't share resources effectively. What was the struggle?
The problem.
3, resolution, the outcome lesson. Explain how that conflict was overcome and what was learned. So, we implemented a central shared resource platform which ultimately cut the internal project approval time by about 40%. What changed?
The solution and result.
And 4, crucially, relevance. Explicitly connect the story back to your current message or proposal. This past experience clearly proves why we absolutely must have centralized oversight for this new project structure to succeed. Why did you tell that story now?
That makes stories feel less like rambling and more like strategic tools.
Yeah.
Okay, as we discuss influence, we absolutely have to address the line between guidance and, well, manipulation.
Yes, it's a critical distinction. Persuasion must always aim to be guidance towards a mutually beneficial outcome, never domination or trickery. And this is largely enforced through using inclusive language.
How does that work?
You actively avoid coercive or overly definitive phrasing. Instead, you rely on phrases that invite collaboration, like, perhaps we could consider this approach, or what's your initial reaction to this idea? Or how do you feel about moving forward with this recommendation? It respects the listener's autonomy and keeps them engaged as a willing partner, not someone being pushed.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's tackle the really high-stakes territory. Handling difficult conversations. We can prepare all we want, but conflict, disagreements, tough feedback, they're inevitable.
They are, and preparation here is absolutely critical. Before you even initiate a difficult conversation, whether it's giving negative performance feedback or addressing a sensitive mistake, you must do two things internally first. First, define your single most important desired outcome. What do you need to achieve from this conversation? Be crystal clear. Second, you must try to anticipate every potential emotional and logical reaction from the other person. What might they say? How might they feel? You almost prepare mini scripts in your head for those potential counter-arguments or objections.
Pre-planning the responses. Got it.
Yeah.
And when you're actually in the thick of the conflict, what are the moment-to-moment techniques to keep the conversation as productive as possible, stopping it from escalating?
It really relies heavily on deploying those foundational skills under pressure. Active listening must come first, always. Before you defend your position, before you explain, you listen and you acknowledge their perspective, even if you don't agree with it. Saying something like, I understand that this unexpected timeline shift is creating significant frustration for you. That validation is key.
Acknowledge the emotion.
Acknowledge the emotion. Crucially, you must then keep the focus solely on finding solutions and agreeing on future behavior, not on endlessly rehashing past mistakes or assigning blame. That just derails things. And of course, use those short, intentional pauses and deep breaths to maintain your own emotional control throughout. Stay calm.
Okay. Now, a huge struggle for many people, especially professionals, is the ability to say no. We often default to saying yes just to avoid immediate conflict or disappointment, but that leads to overcommitment, burnout, and sometimes long-term resentment.
It's a classic problem.
How does think first, talk smart, help someone say no assertively, but still politely, maintaining the relationship?
This is all about structure and respect again. You need to be clear, concise, and ideally offer alternatives. 3 parts. 1, clear language. Don't use vague, wishy-washy, apologetic language. Use definitive statements. Thank you for thinking of me, but I won't be able to take on this particular project right now.
Direct no.
Direct but polite. 2, provide brief reasoning. Offer a short, professional, and honest rationale. No need for elaborate excuses. I currently have prior commitments that require my immediate focus this month, which unfortunately prevents me from giving this the quality attention it deserves.
Concise reason.
And 3, if possible, offer alternatives or compromise. This transforms the no from rejection into a collaborative problem-solving attempt. While I can't manage the entire task, perhaps I could review the final outline for you next week. Or, have you considered reaching out to Sarah? I believe she has more bandwidth right now and the necessary expertise for this. You demonstrate respect for the request while firmly maintaining your boundary.
That feels much more constructive. Okay, let's address high-pressure situations, specifically things like job interviews, maybe the spontaneous Q&A after a big presentation, or intense negotiations. Time for deep reflection is basically non-existent in those moments.
True. And in these scenarios, preparation carries probably 80% of the weight. You absolutely must have your core message structured in your head beforehand. Intro, maybe 3 key supporting points, and a clear conclusion mentally memorized or at least outlined.
Have your framework ready.
Exactly. And during the actual delivery, the pause is your greatest weapon, even more so here. Even a deliberate, short 2-second pause before answering a challenging interview question communicates thoughtfulness and composure, not panic. It buys you crucial processing time.
But what if you are genuinely blindsided by a question? Something completely out of left field you didn't prepare for?
It happens. The key is you need pre-prepared fallback phrases ready to deploy instantly to buy yourself thinking time. Never, ever rush into an answer you haven't fully vetted internally. Use neutral, professional bridging statements like, that's an insightful question. Let me just take a moment to ensure my response is comprehensive. Or perhaps, before I answer that directly, could you maybe clarify what you mean by success in that specific context?
Buys time gracefully.
Exactly. It communicates competence, respects the complexity of their inquiry, and gives your brain those vital few seconds to structure a thoughtful reply based on everything we've discussed. So we stress this throughout, but it bears repeating. This isn't about a single training session or reading one article. Mastering thoughtful communication really requires consistency. You're literally building new neural pathways in your brain, and consistency is the engine of that change.
Makes sense. Practice makes permanent.
Precisely. And the sources provide an excellent structured daily routine to help listeners integrate these skills for the long term.
Okay, let's break down that routine, starting with the morning warm-up. What does that look like?
Just dedicate maybe 10 to 15 minutes each morning to deliberately priming your mind for thoughtful communication that day. It involves 3 simple steps. First, journaling your goals for the day related to communication. Something specific, like, today I will successfully use the 3-count pause at least 3 times when I receive unexpected criticism. Measurable.
Okay. Setting intention.
Second, briefly reviewing successes and mistakes from the previous day's communication. What went well? Where did I slip up? Quick reflection. And third, visualization. Mentally rehearse upcoming conversations you anticipate having. See yourself handling them calmly, listening actively, pausing effectively, and delivering clear, structured, precise responses. Like an athlete visualizing their performance.
Okay, prime the brain. Then we move into the afternoon application. Presumably, this is the real-life practice part.
This is where the theory meets reality. Throughout your day, you actively look for opportunities to apply the skills we've discussed, consciously focusing on listening more, deliberately inserting that 3-count pause, trying to apply the 3-part structure in meetings or even email.
Be intentional during the day.
Yes. And it's also really important to capture key interactions, maybe jot down a note after a challenging conversation in your journal or a dedicated app throughout the day. This provides raw data for more detailed reflection later.
Which brings us to the evening reflection, closing that learning loop.
Exactly. Use maybe 15-20 minutes in the evening to review the day's communication successes and failures based on your notes and memory. Identify precisely which emotional triggers you struggled with or which situations tripped you up.
Analyzing the data.
Right. And crucially, engage in learning from effective communicators. The guide specifically suggests watching or listening to leaders known for their deliberate, measured, and often empathetic communication styles. Especially under pressure, people like maybe Satya Nadella or Sheryl Sandberg are often cited. Don't just listen to what they say, but watch how they say it.
Yeah.
Their pace, their pauses, their word choice, their body language. Learn by observing mastery.
That's a great practical tip. It's also incredibly useful that we can now leverage modern tools to accelerate this whole growth process. The sources talk quite a bit about integrating technology for objective feedback.
Yeah, technology can provide objective, unemotional data about your communication habits, which is hard to get otherwise. Language and communication apps, things like Speako or Rai or examples mentioned, can be fantastic here.
How do they work?
They analyze your recorded spoken communication. Maybe you record yourself practicing a presentation or even a mock conversation. They can then flag your reliance on filler words, all those ums, likes, so's. They can check your pacing and tempo. Are you speaking too fast? And some can even evaluate the perceived clarity and confidence of your delivery based on acoustic features. This numerical feedback helps you pinpoint habits you might not even realize you have.
Objective data is powerful, and this is where the AI chatbots come in, right?
Yeah.
They're not just for generating text anymore, they're being used for behavioral practice.
Absolutely. They're becoming incredibly powerful and, importantly, risk-free training partners. You can use advanced AI chatbots like sophisticated versions of GPT or specialized communication practice platforms to simulate complex, high-pressure conversations.
Give me an example.
Sure. You could prompt the bot. Act as a frustrated client who just received a delayed project deliverable. I need to practice my conflict resolution skills using active listening and solution-focused language. Then you just engage in the back-and-forth conversation with the AI.
And what specific feedback can the listener expect from an AI simulation like that? Perhaps feedback they couldn't easily get from a human practice partner.
The AI excels at objective pattern recognition. It can analyze your text or sometimes even your voice input during the simulation and provide instant feedback on things like 1. Emotional language detection. Did your phrasing come across as defensive, accusatory, or maybe overly passive? The AI can flag words associated with negative sentiment.
Okay, tone analysis.
2. Structural integrity. Did you actually lead with the main point? Did you provide supporting evidence where needed? Did you conclude with a clear action? It can check against the structures we discussed.
Adherence to the model.
3. Phrasing quality. It can highlight instances where you used vague language, relied heavily on filler phrases, and often suggest more precise or professional alternatives. This ability to practice both structure and tone under simulated pressure without any real-world consequences or judgment is frankly revolutionary for accelerating skill development.
That does sound incredibly useful. Now, for someone just beginning this journey, trying to change every aspect of their communication all at once feels overwhelming, probably impossible. What layered roadmap for sustainable growth does the source material recommend? How should someone phase this in?
Yeah, overwhelming yourself is counterproductive. The key is to layer the skills sequentially, focusing on achieving a decent level of mastery in one area before adding the next complexity. The suggested roadmap looks something like this. Month 1, focus purely on the foundation. That means drilling the pause practice, that 3 count, and consistently using the trigger journal to build self-awareness. Do nothing else but embed these habits until the pause starts feeling more automatic.
Okay, just pause and reflect from month 1.
Month 2, add structure. Now, consciously work on bringing clarity to your word choice, fighting that vagueness, and deliberately applying the 3-part structure, intro, main, conclusion, to your communication. Maybe starting with internal meetings and important emails.
Layering on clarity and structure.
Month 3, start working on influence. Begin practicing empathy more consciously, really thinking about adjusting your message for different audiences. And start experimenting with incorporating short, relevant stories and basic persuasive techniques like clearly stating your evidence.
Pause, structure, influence. That phased approach makes it feel much more manageable. Finally, what about common challenges that might persist even with practice? Things like speaking too quickly or using overly complex language or that stubborn habit of interrupting.
Those are common hurdles. For rapid speech, the prescription is often physical retraining. Try practicing reading complex material aloud for maybe 10 minutes a day. Force yourself to maintain a moderate, deliberate tempo and insert short, conscious pauses at every comma and sentence boundary. You're retraining your rhythm.
Okay, physical practice for pacing.
For overcomplicating language, a great exercise is to take the most dense or jargon-filled idea you're working on today, maybe a complex proposal or technical explanation, and rewrite it into plain, simple, conversational English, as if you were explaining it clearly and respectfully to a highly intelligent 12-year-old. Can you make it accessible without losing the core meaning?
Simplify, simplify, got it. And that persistent issue of interrupting.
That requires conscious effort on listening. Actively aim for something like a 70-30 listening to talking ratio in most conversations. 70% listening. Use body language nodding, eye contact to signal you're engaged, which can reduce the urge to jump in. Sometimes keeping your hands lightly clasped or holding a pen can physically prevent that impulsive hand gesture that often precedes an interruption.
Physical restraint almost.
A little bit. And if the conversation flow really requires you to intervene, rely on those polite, pre-planned phrases we talked about. That's a really interesting point. I'd like to respond to that after you finish your thought. Assertive, but respectful.
Yeah.
#tag outro.
Wow, this has been a truly deep dive into transforming communication from just, raw instinct into a genuine, highly refined strategy. Let's quickly summarize the 5 core pillars we've covered today for you to take away and start using.
Yeah, if you remember these 5 interconnected steps, you're well on your way. Pause before you speak. Structure your thoughts clearly, listen actively first, empathize with your audience, and continuously reflect on your performance to improve.
Pause, structure, listen, empathize, reflect. Got it.
And the synthesis of all the research is absolutely clear on this. Consistency in practice, even small daily efforts, is the ultimate engine of mastery here.
And we really encourage you, the listener, to move beyond just feeling like you want to communicate better. Start tracking your progress using measurable indicators. Use that journal to actually log the number of times you successfully paused in stressful situations this week, or the instances where you consciously used the 3-part structure in a meeting, or maybe note down how often you felt you effectively navigated a difficult conflict using empathy over just reacting. Make it concrete.
Definitely. As we close out today, let us leave you with a final, maybe provocative thought derived directly from the source material. Mastering this think first, talk smart approach isn't just about better conversations. It's really a lifelong journey toward becoming the most intentional, impactful version of yourself. The ultimate transformation happens when thoughtful, structured, empathetic speech becomes your default operational mode. And that fundamentally upgrades both your personal and your professional relationships across the board.
So remember this vital distinction as you go about your day. The pause is never just a delay. It is the powerful, decisive moment where clarity, influence, and connection are deliberately created. Use it wisely.
Well said. Until the next deep dive.